In today's video, we have a lot to cover, including a trade scenario I'd like to discuss with you. It's certainly not something that's being discussed by the teams right now, but could we see a Leafs and Ducks blockbuster deal? I want to discuss that scenario. Plus, we have a few teams that are reportedly concerned about losing a goalie on waivers and may make some trades to avoid losing players for nothing. That includes the Montreal Canadiens and the Buffalo Sabres. We have the latest updates from Elliotte Friedman on the Shea Pinto situation. We have another front office edition in Pittsburgh and some key injuries to talk about as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover today. It was another busy day on the NHL waiver wire. I did cover that in an earlier video. In case you didn't have a chance to catch that one yet, I will link it here in the YouTube cards. Busy day. We had a player claimed by the Sharks from the Rangers, and we had another 20 plus players on waivers today as well, including a few interesting names out there, like Lassie Thompson, former first rounder from the Sens, Drake Caggiula with the Oilers, and a few other veterans there as well. So I'll be curious to see. The waiver season is going to be in full force here likely over the next week as teams make lots of roster cuts and trim down their rosters to get ready for opening night. So as I mentioned, we also have some pretty interesting yet impactful injuries to affect some teams here going into the second half of the training camp, preseason part of the season here. The Toronto Maple Leafs might be losing Connor Timmins long term, which is a real unfortunate thing. He was having a heck of a preseason, was a standout point-wise and playing real well for them. Looked like he was going to have a good chance at grabbing a top six spot, probably play in the third pair, or at the very least be in their top seven to be on the NHL roster. And they also were dealing with an injury to John Klingberg, so as well as he was playing, might even have him briefly be able to move up even higher in the lineup, perhaps. But now Timmins got hurt on the game last night, Friday night, apparently near the end of the game. I didn't see the clip. I was watching other NHL action when this happened, and I haven't been able to find the highlight of it. But Timmins apparently suffered a lower body injury late in the game. He's having an MRI done today. We'll probably know more in the next day or so. But the Leafs are saying that it didn't look good, and they're concerned at least that it could be a long-term injury. Now, this guy has had terrible luck in his career. He's had some concussion issues. He's missed a ton of time already. I'd really hate to see this young guy have another setback and miss significant time yet again, but that could be a big blow for Connor Timmins. I mean, I know the Leafs obviously will miss him if he's out long-term, but more than anything, I just feel for the player considering how much he's been through in his young career. Was drafted by the Avalanche, had a high potential, played with Team Canada, looked like coming out of junior, looked just real good, real solid top four potential, and then he's had a couple of concussions to set him back. Now, this isn't a concussion, thankfully, but still, this guy needs to play, and it's kind of just unfortunate set of circumstances for him. We've also seen a setback in Anaheim. Alex Killorn, new signed free agent, who they signed to a lucrative deal, over $6 million a season. I think it was for 4 years, I believe it was. He's got a fractured finger now, and he's going to miss the first month or so of the season as well. So that's certainly not the way you want to start your career with a new team after, obviously, Killorn played in Tampa a long time, and for the most part, he was pretty healthy. He wasn't really somebody who's missed a whole lot of time over the years, but things do happen, unfortunately. Of course, we know, and we're going to talk about the Trevor Zegras stalemate here with the Ducks, so certainly having a guy like Killorn out, another guy who's expected to play a top six role. I mean, the Ducks are not too worried about winning this year. They're certainly going to be another year of development and getting another high pick, but at the same time, that hurts. So I'm sure Killorn is bummed too to have to sit out the first month of his time with Anaheim. We also had another front office addition in Pittsburgh. The Penguins have hired former AGM of the Ottawa Senators, Trent Mann. He's now the player development and scouting advisor in Pittsburgh. Mann left the Ottawa Senators under some, I'm not sure how to call it, but odd circumstances. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Now, his brother had left the organization, and that was the one where he was the AHL coach and had been accused of sharing pre-scout information with other teams. Obviously, he didn't know about his brother leaving. It was an odd scenario. And then he left Ottawa. He was let go by Pierre Dorion not long before ownership took over. So I know there was some speculation that maybe we'd even see a wrongful dismissal lawsuit. I don't know. It just was weird because the Mann brothers were both in Ottawa a long time. Trent was there for over 12 years in various roles. It was well respected for a long time, and all of a sudden it was gone. It was just really odd scenario. So it's nice to see him land on his feet and get another opportunity in Pittsburgh. So he'll be part of their front office working with the scouting department, which is where his background is. When it comes to Shane Pinto, Elliotte Friedman put out a new report today saying that he's had multiple sources say to him that the gap has become larger instead of smaller, and that the latest offer, which apparently the player is very disappointed by, and if the offer that's being reported is true, then I can understand why, was only a 1-year, $1 million offer. Now, to me, that tells me something that says that they're having a difficult time making a trade. The prices are probably too high to get a team to take their contracts off their book, like a Matthew Joseph or whoever they're still talking, because they're rumored to be looking at Joseph or Brandstrom, or they need a player to shed at least $2 million or if not more off the books. And obviously, if they get a $1 million contract on the books, they can move players around between NHL and AHL, adjust their roster, that they could probably figure that out. But they're probably just trying to see, is there any way Pinto would play for that and help us out this year, and then we can maybe make it up to him next year. I'm not suggesting that that's a good offer, that he should take it. I can understand why he's upset and why he feels that's pretty much a lowball offer, because it is. He's definitely worth more than that. So, I mean, Morgan Frost signed for a little over, I think it was 2.1, and he's definitely a little stronger, a little bit, than him. So I think he's probably looking for closer to 2.5. And I don't think that's unreasonable. If they can do 2.5 for 2 years and he'd still have arb rights at the end of it, to me, that's a fair deal for both sides. Even 2.5 for 1 year is fine, and they can renegotiate next year. Next year, they'll have a lot more cap flexibility. They have a bunch of guys on expiring deals. The cap's supposed to be going up. They have a fair bit of dead money that they're still paying on some buyouts, like Bobby Ryan's buyout's still on there. Colin White, it's not huge, but still, it's there. Del Zotto, it's not a ton, but every little bit adds up, and then you factor in some of the, you don't have really much for bad contracts, but every little bit going against you hurts. And when you're, that close to having enough money, but, they obviously wanted to get Tarasenko and it worked out, but now they're short on signing Pinto. As much as you like to have him, is it worth being in this predicament? You got to question that, right? So we'll see what happens here, but obviously they're going to need around more than $2 million for sure. I think 2.5 might get it done. I don't know if he wants a 1 year or 2 year deal, but at the end of the day, they need to figure something out and quick, because training camp time is slowly ticking away here. And if he misses all of camp, he's bound to probably have a slow start to the season. Look at what happened with Brady Tkachuk when he signed his contract. He missed all of training camp, and he missed, I think he was signing his contract during their first game, I believe it was. I just remember he made this appearance during a second period or something like that, or first period. It was early in the game. I just remember he came out to the crowd, big ovation, and but of course he didn't have everything done in time to even consider playing. But then of course they wanted to let him practice, get his timing back, and stuff like that. Have a chance to kind of gauge his conditioning, which was pretty good, but still, it's hard to be in NHL conditioning shape without being actually in camp and in games. And, obviously he did have a slower start to the season. So they don't need that. They need a good start to the season, or, heads are going to roll there. So they need to get this figured out, but that's the latest on that situation. A couple of teams really worry about goaltending issues and losing a goalie on waivers, because there's bound to be a lot here in the next few days. But Darren Dreger's reporting that the Montreal Canadiens are worried about losing Caden Primo. That they figure, he says that they think if they put him on waivers to send him to Laval, that he's going to get claimed. They don't really want that to happen, especially not to lose him for nothing. So all he said was that obviously they can carry 3 goalies. They do have the capacity, but it's not ideal for anybody, in that they would rather take care of their own business another way, essentially. So makes it sound like they probably will carry 3 if they have to, and then consider making a trade for somebody. Now, who that player is going to be? Are they going to trade Primo, or are they going to move Jake Allen. It's difficult to say, but it's not ideal to carry 3 guys because you're going to always have somebody sitting out for too long, and it's just not really ideal. So won't be shocked if we see the Habs make a goalie move perhaps before the end of camp, or if they can't find a deal they like, maybe they take the chance on waivers, but they put a lot of time and money and invested in Caden Primo. It would certainly suck for them to lose him for nothing. Same goes in Buffalo. They're obviously in a predicament where they have Devin Levi, of course, who's the new star guy in town, expected to be on the NHL roster. I'm not sure if he'll be more of a starter, 1A, 1B, a backup, we don't know. But based on how he played a little bit at the end of last year and how he's looked in the preseason, he's a rookie, but he could very well be the starter. He really does look that way. So if that's the case, there's some talk that, Eric Comrie, who you might think of as being the number 3 guy there, might get picked up on waivers, and then their depth won't be as good. And Friedman was saying on the podcast, 32 Thoughts, that maybe instead of putting Comrie on waivers, he wouldn't be shocked if they moved UPL, if they moved Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen instead, and go with Levi and Comrie. If Levi's capable of being the starter, then really what's the future of Luukkonen anyway? He's not going to end up becoming more than a backup there, and he's probably not going to be thrilled without him, at least the longer term. So even if it doesn't happen right away, odds are Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's not going to have a long future in Buffalo if Levi works out the way that a lot of people think he will. So, maybe it's best to get something done now and get him into a spot where it's better for him, that you don't lose Comrie on waivers. You can bring back something else that might help the team in another way. So we might see a few goalies, and we know there's teams out there like the Avalanche that are looking for help. Columbus just picked up Spencer Martin. There's other teams that have some question marks that are either looking for an upgrade or might be dealing with injuries as camp comes to a close. So certainly watch for those teams to maybe be making a move. Now, I also saw a lot of chatter about a potential trade. Now, this is, like I said, this is not a trade rumor that's being reported by Elliot Friedman or Drager or any of the insiders saying that the teams are discussing this. This is just something I've seen on social media. I think it might have started actually on the Spit and Chicklets podcast, and then it's kind of just spread from there. I seen one of their clips from a recent podcast where they were talking about the possibility of would they do this because both teams have issues, trade Trevor Zegras for William Nylander. And I got thinking about it, and I was like, I've long said myself, I think the Ducks are a good landing spot for Nylander if they can't come to terms to stay in Toronto. I know that Toronto's first option is to sign Nylander, and I'm sure his first option is to sign and stay as well. And I'm not saying William Nylander is going anywhere, but we do know that William Nylander's contract demands appear to be too much, that the Leafs don't want to pay that, and they're trying to hope that he comes down on his asking price. Well, I don't see that happening, for one, because, based on how negotiations have gone with him before and what we've seen in the past, I don't see it. If he has a similar season to last year, he's got every right to be asking for the big money too. So, would the Ducks be more comfortable paying him big money? Because clearly they don't want to pay Trevor Zegras big money long term, which boggles me. I don't understand that. But, they clearly were comfortable giving big money to Alex Killorn. They got like Ryan Strome the year before. Would a veteran guy like Nylander, who's still young enough but has a good amount of playoff experience now, who could be giving them a bunch of his prime years and partner with a lot of their other top young talent? There's still Troy Terry and Mason McTavish, Leo Carlson. Long term they may have to move one of those guys anyway. Obviously, like the latest reports on Zegras is like $4 million over times 3. So like $12 million over 3 years, which is really low. So if the Leafs, for example, the argument here makes a lot of sense that if the Ducks were comfortable paying Nylander what he wanted to make him happy, let's say that they get to this point, they give him his $9.5 to $10 million or whatever it is that Nylander's looking for. If they came to terms and they were both happy, and Zegras could get a longer term deal around $7-8 million, the Leafs could get a young, offensively explosive player like Zegras to replace Nylander for less money. He can play center, so you've already got your number 2 center to play behind Matthews, who you can on a long-term basis. Tavares isn't going to be there super long-term, and I think there's an argument to be made that Tavares could play on the wing. He very well could. You know, and Zegras is long, or even if you go about it the way you're tackling it this year with Nylander at center, let's say you go in duos and you go with Zegras on the third line. Either way, it doesn't matter. Long term, you have your number 2 center in Trevor Zegras, who's a young, exciting player, going to help continue to sell lots of merchandise and help make that franchise lots of money, because that's, you know, a lot of the stars there have done that. He would fit well with Matthews and Marner. He's not that, I mean, he's a little bit younger, but not drastically. Like, you get a young, exciting offensive player. I mean, maybe the deal's not 1-for-1 either because of age. I don't know. It's just a very interesting thought. You have Nylander, who's having a difficult time extending in Toronto. You get Zegras, who's getting lowballed and, you know, having a hard time with Anaheim. I believe it was 32 Thoughts podcast. I think it was Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman were talking about Nylander back over the summer when they had mentioned, I think it might have been Jeff Merrick, I can't remember exactly, who suggested that the Ducks was a good landing spot for Nylander. And really, like, he could be heavily elevated into a bigger role and could lead those young Duck players and use his experience he's gained in Toronto. You know, it's just an interesting concept. You get 2 players that, you know, are having a difficult time on their next contracts, different ages, different style of play. But, I mean, really, if you're Toronto, I mean, I'm not saying Anaheim would offer Zegras up for Nylander 1-for-1. I don't think it would be 1-for-1. I really don't. But if you're talking to the Ducks and they're willing to put Zegras on the table, like, you got to listen. I would do that deal. If I'm Toronto, I'm especially doing that deal. If I'm Anaheim, where Nylander's a little bit older, and if you want to look long term, and if you think Zegras might have a long term higher ceiling than Nylander, then maybe you want more. I don't know. It's just an interesting concept. Be curious to see what Leaf and Duck fans or anybody else who's neutral, what you think. So leave me some comments down below. Do you think this is a conversation these two teams should be having? Is this a trade that makes sense to you? If it's not 1-for-1, how does it work? What would you add to it to make it worthwhile? Just want to get a conversation going, see what everybody thinks. It might be a crazy idea to some, but might not be as far-fetched as you might think, depending on how these negotiations go. So let me know your thoughts, and we'll talk about it further in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.